Hi, this is Gail. Welcome to my channel. What I thought I'd talk to you about today is funeral customs, because they can be wildly different depending on where you are within the U.S. Talking about this from the perspective of someone who lives in the South. So where you're from, it may be totally different. In the South, part of what we do when somebody passes away is we have generally it's a 2-hour receiving of friends on one night, with the funeral at the conclusion of that receiving of friends. So let's say you're receiving friends from like 5 to 7. The funeral would be at 7, and the next day, generally, we would meet outside at the cemetery for a graveside. Now, sometimes people will choose to have just the graveside, and either way is fine. Graveside services, the burial happens a day after the funeral. The family will oftentimes gather at the funeral home, and there will be a procession over to the cemetery. So like, let's say you have a graveside burial scheduled for 1 o'clock. People will often gather at the funeral home to leave at around noon, and sometimes there at the funeral home that day there will be some prayers, or somebody will say just something very, very brief, and then they'll go over to the cemetery where the pastor or someone will say a few words. Now, saying a few words at the cemetery can range from standing at the graveside for just a few minutes while the obituary and the Lord's Prayer or another scripture, 23rd Psalm, something like that would be read, and then a prayer there at graveside. It can range from something that simple on up to a full sermon, and it just depends on what the family wants. We do either in the South. And then where I think that the South separates from some other traditions around the country is the family meal after burial. Because what happens then is, throughout the past few days, people will have brought food to the house of the grieving. That way it helps them serve people who may be coming in from out of town or out of state. The burden of feeding them is not placed on the family, so the church helps out. Well, after a burial, what happens is the church again brings a meal for the family. That way they can have something to eat right after the burial. In some parts of the country, that meal is on the family, and once in a while you'll hear about that being done here in the South too, but it's much more common for people, at least in rural church areas. It's much more common for people to show up with casseroles and what we call covered dishes. Some areas would call that potluck. And then when the meal starts drawing to a conclusion, the food will be offered to the family and put into go containers so they can take it home, and they don't have to cook, the next day. They can warm it up, or they can freeze the food and use it later, because the grieving process takes a while, and so oftentimes people will take food home for when they're overwhelmed later and they don't have to cook. It's a way that really helps out.
At our church, we view the meal as a chance for the family to get together, maybe decompress a little bit and talk and visit for a little while before everybody scatters off back to their homes or back to work. And it's just a good chance for them to kind of catch their breath before heading out.
Something else that I should mention is the meals are typically brought to the church of the person that just passed away. Sometimes it will be done in the church or community hall of one of the close family members. So let's say a woman passes away and she's very, very close to her son, who's active in a church that's not of the one that his mom was involved with. So the food oftentimes would be handled there, and it's just very informal, some phone calls, and it's all worked out. There are some funeral homes in the South that actually have kitchens, so that way the family will have a little respite area that they can escape to for a few minutes and just decompress before they go out and greet family and friends. Again, casual, just rotate in and out. That lets people bring casseroles on over to the funeral homes, or cookies and drinks, just for the family to have a little something there at the funeral home. Sometimes this is used and sometimes it's not. Oftentimes that's boxed up and taken to the cemetery and then the church afterwards, just packed in coolers and kept cold. That's something that may be very different from where you're in. In contrast, the funerals in other parts of the country, that meal afterwards is on the burden of the family, and sometimes they'll go out to a restaurant and so forth. I like the way we do it in the South because I think it takes a lot of the burden off of the family. Nobody expects anything fancy, just something to kind of help decompress and come together and acknowledge the grief. The reason I'm telling you all this today is funeral for the friend of mine is tomorrow. I'm picking up some 2-liter soft drinks, and that's going to be my contribution because I really am not going to have time to cook anything, and so I'm going to bring all the drinks. So that's what we're going to go do right now. I'm back in from the funeral service of my friend. Now, something I didn't talk about on the other funeral segment is styles of dress. Graveside, a lot of people still wear black, but some people will wear some other subdued colors. And yeah, pretty much black for the funeral, and for the most part, black at the graveside, and weather appropriate. So thanks again for watching. Like, subscribe, and I will see you out about and online. Don't forget to comment. Bye. Hello, trusty sidekick. The one who's laying on my jacket. But I love you, what can we say?